Good morning, everyone. All right, we hardly ever start on time, but we are going to this year because we have a very tight schedule this morning. So, first off, welcome to Miami, and in my best Spanish attempt, bienvenidos a Miami. And I would also say, welcome back to our Florida Planning Conference. Let me real quick say that we had an opportunity. By the way, first, I'm Wyatt Bowers. I'm president of APA Florida. Last year we were not able to get together. And a few months ago when we looked at this conference, we were all good to go, and we were very confident. The last month and a half has been a bit challenging. And as I've said to you all a few times, and I'm going to repeat it several more, we want you to have a great, fun, educational, networking experience, but in a really safe manner. So we've given you all masks, and we're going to request that you wear them as often as possible, please, for our hotel staff, for our speakers, for our fellow planners. Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to introduce our welcoming speakers, Mayor Daniela Levine-Cava and Commissioner and Vice Chairman Oliver Gilbert. So first, Daniela Levine-Cava was elected Miami-Dade County's first ever woman mayor in November 2020. She enters the mayor's office following a 40-year career as a relentless advocate for South Florida families in public service and elected leadership. As Miami-Dade County's mayor, she oversees a metropolitan government with more than 28,000 employees serving nearly 3 million residents, managing an annual budget of approximately $9 billion. Mayor Levine-Cava's administration is focused on building a stronger, more inclusive, more resilient Miami-Dade County, and she is also the immediate past chair of the South Florida Regional Planning Council and served as a council member from 2015 to 2020. Commissioner Oliver G. Gilbert III serves as chairman of the Miami-Dade TPO, which is leading the charge to implement the SMART Plan. Chairman Gilbert is also the chair of the Southeast Florida Transportation Council, which provides a tri-county forum for regional planning efforts and policy coordination. Chair Gilbert currently serves as Miami-Dade County Commissioner for District 1 after serving as mayor of Miami Gardens since 2012. He was selected by his peers to serve as the vice chairman of the Board of County Commissioners in 2020. Let's welcome them both.
Well, he's tall and I'm short. How do we do this? Okay, very good. Well, it's really great to be with all of you today, and thank you so much for allowing us to welcome you. And I'm the mayor of the county, and we have a very unique form of government. Maybe some of you know about it. If you have any suggestions, please. I'm open. I'm going through my first budget round, being in office 9 months, and I hope he's voting yes. So, truly, I'd like to tell you that I am a planner by heart, and I'd like to bring more planning into Miami-Dade County. So that is one of my goals, so stay tuned. In fact, we've advertised a position, and I think it's been on your message boards, for a position that would work across all of our departments to make sure that we're cohesively planning for the future for Miami-Dade County. So warm welcome, it is warm, so warm welcome to Miami-Dade, and thank you for the great work that you do. Now, obviously, we live in the most dynamic place on the planet, so there's lots of challenges here, and we're very, very grateful for the approximately 100 of you that actually contribute right here locally every single day. So let's give it up for our local planners. But we know that our problems mostly are not unique. Affordable housing, climate change, public transit, the changing economic landscape that affects us all, and we need to continue to learn from each other, and that's why a conference like this is so very important, and especially the pandemic. And we have unique challenges dealing with the pandemic here in Florida. I'm not going to get into politics, but just suffice it to say we have them. So, but we take a very forward-looking approach here in Miami-Dade County to all of these things. And I framed my administration with what I call the 4 E's. And there's lots of ways to divide up the pie when you're talking about planning, but this, things come to me, and this is the 4 E's of economic development, environmental protection, equity, and engagement. And little secret, I've been pushing them to get ready for the 5th E, which is empathy. Because especially during these very trying times, we know that empathy is really what brings us together. But embedding these practices, these principles into our planning process is what I have been attempting to do as mayor and will continue to do in my tenure. And I'm going to give you as an example, public transportation. We do not yet have world-class transit here in Miami-Dade County, but with the leadership of our TPO, and by the way, not only is he a vice chair of our commission, but he's the chair of our TPO, Transportation Planning Organization. We have a very aggressive plan. I'm very excited about our SMART plan. But just to put it kind of baseline, we have about 100,000 to 200,000 people that use our Metro bus system every day, and for years, our bus system has been deficient. Undependable, unpleasant, doesn't take you where you need to go, single rider. We've had to rely, especially during the pandemic, more on our cars. So we know that we needed to do something very big. And a community group came to us, the Transit Alliance, and they proposed a redo, a deep dive, which had not been done for decades, really. And it was a truly community-driven plan. The commission, the mayor at the time, did buy into it and put some money behind it. And we came up with something that I think is going to be very transformational, the Better Bus Network. In fact, it's on the agenda this month, so hope you're voting yes. And look, you have to take every opportunity, don't you? Advocacy. But truthfully, it is very refreshing. As strong mayor, since I don't vote, I can lobby as much as I want. I can talk to all of the commissioners. But this overhaul will put engagement and equity at the center of our transit conversation. And it is that in conjunction with our very smart plan with 6 corridors, the first of which is already under construction, and others to come, is creating a quality transit network so that we will have choice riders, right? And by the way, have you noticed traffic is back? Anyone get stuck in I-95 southbound this morning? Supposedly that's a good sign. I don't know. But truthfully, we know that we need choice transit to get people out of their cars, and we have to make sure we take care of those who are transit dependent as well. So we also have a huge income divide right here in Miami-Dade. I'm sure one of the worst, if not the worst, in the state. We have at least 28% of our residents living in poverty that most likely are relying on transit. Excuse me, let me say that again. At least 28% of residents living in poverty would have access to high-frequency transit under this plan as compared to 12% today. So that will be a major, major shift in how we address transit for those who really need it. So we're going to create a more affordable community by making transportation more affordable. Of course, we have to tackle our housing issues as well, as do all of you. And part of what I've done in my 9 months is make sure we hear from the public. So we've had the largest ever public engagement process called Thrive 305. Our report is rolling out any second now, so stay tuned, Thrive 305. And lots of what came out from the 27,000 people, that's 1% of our population that fully participated, and really thousands more that participated in other partial ways. We have incorporated a lot of their input into the budget document that, of course, the vice chair is going to vote yes on. So, so I believe in planning. I believe in engagement in the planning process, and I'm very, very grateful for the work that each of you are doing across all of these vexing topics, and including your community to get buy-in, because we know that it takes more than planning. It takes politics to get these things done. So thank you so much for your efforts, and we applaud you, and please come help us here in Miami-Dade County. Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair. He's funnier than I am. So
No, you're plenty funny. You're plenty funny. Good morning, everybody. Oh, come on, you all drink coffee, I don't. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Just a couple of thoughts. First of all, welcome to Miami-Dade County, our wonderful mayor. It's always good to be here with her. She has a leader's heart. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes you get people involved in politics who want politics for the power. And I don't decry power or being powerful. It's what you want to do with it. That's how you measure your heart. And she's a leader's heart, a true leader's heart. And so I appreciate her service. I appreciate her being here this morning. Listen, if we're going to do it right, it's going to be you. If we're going to do resiliency right, if we're going to save the world, if we're going to accommodate for our growing population, if we're going to accommodate for the gaps between the haves and the have-nots, if we're going to do economic development in a way that empowers communities and creates jobs, it's going to be you. It's going to be a function of planning. Look, I understand how difficult your jobs are. As a former mayor and now commissioner and chair of the TPO, I understand because a lot of the information you give won't necessarily be popular. You'll say things that essentially you're the people in the room that's going to say, take your medicine. That's what you're going to say, take your medicine. You're going to say that, listen, we have to have density because we can't build in the Everglades. And we can't build in the Atlantic. Yeah, do not lobby me again. Stop. Yes, you're gonna say those things. So you're gonna say that the people in West Hialeah need to go to work on Miami Beach. You're gonna say those things, and they need transit that's reliable, and it could get them there quickly. You're gonna say that poor families should not be paying such an extraordinary percentage of their household income on transportation. You're going to say these things, and people who have to get elected, like us, well, they're going to say, oh, they want to change your life. Listen, the reason why we're in the shape we are right now is because 60, 70 years ago, people failed to plan. They failed to plan. They failed to plan our corridors. They failed to plan for and prepare for mass transit. They failed to plan for population growth. They failed to consider what we were doing to the environment. If we're going to fix this, right this ship, and move forward in a way that allows us to live in what I believe to be the most beautiful, diverse, extraordinary place on the planet, it's going to be you all here, people just like you who plan for it.
Right.
So I appreciate your all's service. I appreciate your minds. I encourage you, engage your imaginations. Engage your imaginations. I have this saying, I have it on my wall in my office. The bold don't live forever, but the timid don't live at all. I encourage you all to be bold. Thank you.
Good job. All right, Mr. Oliver.
Okay. Well, thank you. We heard a little bit about resiliency just now, and we're going to hear a little bit more in the next few minutes. I'd like to welcome to the stage in just a minute our keynote speaker for this morning, Akisa Omulepu. She's an Emmy-nominated documentarian, director, and producer, and is the founder of Emerge Omnimedia. Emerge's mission is to create and tell stories that explore, investigate, and celebrate the experiences of people from the African diaspora. Most recently, she directed and produced a documentary short for PBS. A Dream Deferred, The Broken Promise of New York City Public Housing, was nominated for 2 Emmys. Her documentary short, Crowned, debuted and had a limited engagement at the Anthology Film Archives in New York City. The film explores the lives of 3 young African-American women navigating their way from high school through college. A native New Yorker to Panamanian and Kenyan parents, Akisa decided to move to Nairobi, Kenya, and fully immerse herself in reporting and producing internationally. Akisa started her career in academia, teaching mathematics in a public school in the South Bronx and at the City University of New York. She earned her bachelor's degree in economics from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania and a graduate degree in journalism from Columbia University. She is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the National Association of Black Journalists. We can welcome Akisa to the stage.
Hi, good morning, Miami. How's everybody doing today? Good. Thank you so much for having me here today. When Lisa Colmenares reached out to me last year to commission me to do this documentary short, it was important that it was representative of Miami and showed a slice of the challenges as related to resiliency. My practice, my work focuses, as was mentioned, on telling stories of sometimes the unseen as well as the seen. My intention when I create work is to show the humanity and nuance of people and of situations. So the runtime is about 19 minutes. It'll be followed with a brief discussion with Irela Bagué and Christian Kamrath afterwards, and we look forward for you to see it. Thank you.
What don't I love about Miami and Miami-Dade County?
Everything from the beaches and the ocean to Biscayne Bay to the walkability of our city.
I love Miami because I was born here, I was raised here.
I love the diversity, I love the mix of cultures, any type of food that you want from anywhere in the world, you can get it here.
El Portal is so cultural and so diverse and has so many people from all different walks of life. It's a great community to be a part of.
You know, one of those, the product of, what you can become in this country.
Someone like me from the deep south in Alabama, and I meet Cuban friends here, and we learn to cook each other's food, and just enjoying that quality of life just can't be beat.
Occasionally at rush hour we get a little upset and a little crazy at rush hour, but other than that we're generally very nice.
Also, the cultural assets. We have the New World Symphony. The Bass Art Museum. Miami Beach has it all.
I am honored to stand before you as the first female mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Elected in the midst of a global pandemic, Mayor Daniela Levine Cava remains steadfast about tackling the challenges of these unprecedented times.
And I promise that I am ready. Estoy lista.
Florida has nearly 8,500 miles of coastline. Rising sea levels could disrupt the lives of the more than 2.7 million people living in Miami-Dade County. Finding solutions to turn the tide on the impact of climate change remains a pressing issue.
We are united in the struggle to rebuild and rebound our economy. And we are united by looming threats to the health of Biscayne Bay, the inescapable impacts of climate change, and the urgent need to protect our environment.
Biscayne Bay is at the heart of the economy for South Florida and is the environmental centerpiece for the region. Irela Bagué is Miami-Dade's first ever Chief Bay Officer and is tasked with protecting Biscayne Bay.
My work focuses on the recovery of Biscayne Bay, our most valuable natural and economic asset, and serves as our region's source of drinking water. This past summer, we experienced an unprecedented fish kill and algal bloom. And our scientists said that this event was largely due to the historic heat levels we experienced last year. And for us in Miami-Dade County, there is no question that climate change is real. We're feeling it, its effects every day.
Some of the challenges that are, that come about when we think about living close to water or near water, places like Miami especially, we talk about experiencing water from all sides. So whether it's from underneath the groundwater and how that affects our water supply, from the west here in Miami, the freshwater flow of the Everglades, we have to consider the protection of that and how that ties to both our drinking water and the health of our ecosystems. And then, of course, from the coast, whether we have to worry about flooding hazards like tidal flooding or storm surge from hurricanes. And then, of course, from above, when we think about extreme rainfall, stormwater, and the same types of hazards that can come with tropical storms, or just a really intense thunderstorm, which we've been seeing more and more of here in South Florida.
There's also another concern facing South Florida.
The king tides are indeed back. The so-called super king tides are coming.
By late Monday morning, during the peak of king tide, the docks, boat ramp, and a huge part of the parking lot were flooded.
So a king tide is a naturally occurring phenomena. We get our high tides every single day, but at certain times of the year when the sun and the moon align in just a way, the gravitational pull is that much greater, and basically you get a higher than normal high tide. But that becomes more of an issue since we've seen sea level rise about 10 inches over the last 100 years. And so those high tides that naturally occur are getting more and more impactful in communities like this.
This neighborhood used to be ground zero for impacts of king tides. This neighborhood on a beautiful sunny day during a king tide would have been underwater and people would be moving around with canoes, kayaks, or cars would just be plowing through water. And so this is where the city really started to invest in the infrastructure.
Miami Beach is fortunate enough to be surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean and Biscayne Bay. As we're thinking about the future and climate change and sea level rise, we're needing to look at it from multiple angles. It's everything from increased heat to groundwater rising and tides and storm surge events. So it really is a multi-tiered approach, and we think about resiliency in an integrated way. We look at how we can maximize our projects and programs to have a benefit both today as well as preparing ourselves for the future.
One of those programs includes investing in key infrastructure to make Miami Beach more resilient.
This is the stormwater pumping system. This is where the bulk of the infrastructure is located for this area of the Sunset Harbor neighborhood. Over there you have the generator system. You can see how it's lifted up. And the purpose of the generator system is if the power goes out, the generator will take over with pumping. Typically the power may go out with a storm, and that's when we need the pumps the most. So that makes sure that the system can continue to function even if the power goes out. Over here we have this raised area. This is the electrical system for our pumping structures for the Sunset Harbor neighborhood. Those again are raised so that they can continue to function in case flash floods or anything like that is happening. And then over there, underground, which you can't see, it's open over there. You see some flaps. The pumping system is actually located underground in that hole. The pumps are located down there. There's also water treatment systems. There's a vortex structure which takes out any solids that are located that are in the storm water. There's a settling box that makes sure that any oil rises to the top so that doesn't go out to the bay, and treats the storm water before it gets pumped out to the bay. The space provided for the pumps are larger than the current pumps, and that's intended to ensure that over time, as our demands increase, that there's room to install more capacity for stormwater.
In addition to improving the pump system in Miami Beach, the city also raised the seawalls to help keep the impact of rising sea levels at bay. However, raising the height of the roads and buildings has proven to be most effective.
The road raising infrastructure is really the most important part of the infrastructure that's taken place here in this neighborhood. It's also been the most impactful for residents and for businesses. It's really changed the way the neighborhood functions. It's changed the way on-street parking works, the way sidewalk cafes work, but it allows the neighborhood to survive. So you can see here, this sidewalk has 2 levels. This side over here is the new elevation that we've set for the neighborhood, and this is the height that was selected in order to minimize impacts related to king tides and sea level rise for a long period of time. And then over there you see the old elevation. The old elevation has to be provided to ensure that the older buildings that have their elevations at a lower level continue to have access. We can't block their access. And these buildings don't have sufficient elevation where they could just raise their ground floor, which is one of the new regulations that we're implementing, ensuring new buildings have enough height so that over time they can just raise their ground floor and continue to function. And then what the stormwater pumping system does is it just has to pump the water out of this area as opposed to the whole street whenever there's a king tide. As it relates to the economy for this area, when there's flooding happening, when there's a king tide, the area functions like normal. You don't even know that it's happening. Whereas a few years ago, it would have been underwater and the area would basically cease to function economically.
My name is Elizabeth Fatah Carpenter. I am a resident of the village of El Portal. I'm a managing attorney for the Everglades Law Center, and I am the chair of the Village of El Portal Sustainability and Resiliency Task Force. One of the great benefits of El Portal is that we're on the Little River, or the C7 Canal, but that also, as you mentioned, comes with a lot of challenges related to sea level rise and climate change. And in the last few years, as much of the state and Miami-Dade County have, we're starting to see those issues intensify and becoming more of a problem throughout the year, and something that we're having to grapple with as a municipality as well as a county. In 2020, we actually had 2 flooding events in the village, and part of that is a result of our location geographically and hydrologically within the county. We are at we like to say the drain end of the Little River Canal, and so all the water that drains into the Little River further upstream and further west ends up in the village of El Portal and runs up against essentially a drainage gate at the very end of the river, which is situated in the village. So as a result of that, we had a flood event in Memorial Day weekend, which resulted in significant flooding in the city, in the village that sat in people's lawns for a number of days. And we had another flooding event following the Eta tropical storm towards the end of the year. And both of those events resulted, unfortunately, in the failure of a number of residential home septic tanks, which results in a backup of the septic tanks into the yards, which causes both a human health concern and an environmental concern.
One of the large contributors to the decline of the health of the bay is septic tanks, and the impacts of sea level rise, climate change, heavy rainfall events, any kind of flooding activity that moves that untreated wastewater into our environment and adds the nutrient load to the bay, and that's a contributor to the declining health of the bay. So what my task is with the team that we have assembled here at the Water and Sewer Department is to eliminate as many of those septic tanks as possible, as timely as possible, and get those homes and businesses connected to wastewater systems where their waste will be properly treated and disposed of.
The elevation of the village actually varies very substantially. I think our lowest area is maybe 2.5 to 3 feet, and our highest elevation is 12 feet or over 10 feet. And so these, what are seemingly small changes in elevations have a really significant impact on the residents that live in those various elevations. So in the lower lying areas of the village, I think up to about 4 feet, people were seeing flooding in their yards for 5, 6, 7 days. And that means because we're a city that is still on septic and has not been connected to sewer, that means that our septic tanks are discharging into that flood water that is sitting in people's yards. And so that's been a real problem from an education standpoint, just to let people know that that water is contaminated and not safe, and also from an environmental concern, because all of that flood water eventually drains out into the Little River Canal and drains into Biscayne Bay, which is really the lifeblood of Miami-Dade County.
The real-world consequences of rising sea levels is felt in neighborhoods like Little River. Sabrina Jackson is the site coordinator for the Little Haiti Optimist Club. She's witnessed firsthand the impact flooding has in her neighborhood and on the children.
When there's flooding, the impact for the kids is very severe. Some of them can miss school or not attend the program. We do have a shortened delay and start time because of the flooding.
According to a Pew Charitable Trust report, more than 40% of schools in Miami-Dade County are in a flood zone. Flooding often disrupts student learning, impacts the community, and repairs can strain municipal budgets. Complicating sea level rise is climate gentrification.
The more economically distressed areas of the inner cities are now on very valuable land close to the downtown urban core, and they also happen to be on higher ground. So it's a twofold problem.
There are pressures, and folks are being displaced as we speak, and so I think we have to think really carefully about the types of incentives or disincentives that we offer to developers, as well as the protections against the folks who are living in these areas that are being displaced.
In spite of challenges, residents and local leaders remain hopeful that collaborative and resilient solutions can be found to ensure Miami-Dade County will remain a vibrant community for generations to come.
We're looking with the county and the state's assistance on creating this really complex resiliency plan. But as you know, that the Miami-Dade County is very interconnected. So we need a plan that not only addresses what's happening in the village of El Portal, but what's happening in the entire drainage basin, which affects us and which affects the rest of the county. Because really, at the end of the day, everything drains into Biscayne Bay.
The sea level rise strategy, what it really does is it outlines both a summary of what we know to date based on multiple studies and reports and analysis in terms of our expected impacts. It outlines sort of a framework for how we can adapt, what is the combination of approaches that we can take, including things like elevating buildings or using more green and blue infrastructure. And then it outlines basically a set of 10 key actions and a number of projects that the county is pursuing to tackle this holistic problem of sea level rise.
I do not think that we'll reach that point. I think that the infrastructure investments will be made to make sure that it is livable. There's too much invested here to just let it go underwater. And we'll, as technology evolves, we'll come up with the solutions necessary to make sure that this area will survive.
People are actually working on new ideas, and that there is hope, and that there are jobs that are coming, and that the environment absolutely is the economy, and that we'll get it right.
Hi, everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed that doc short. With us right now, I have Irela Bagay and Christian Kamrath. Irela, please tell everybody what you do.
So I am Miami-Dade County's first Chief Bay Officer. I don't think there's another Chief Bay Officer around, at least not that we...
Not in New York, for sure.
we've checked anywhere. And really that position stemmed from some work that was done stemming from some of the issues that you heard about. We had significant amount of seagrass die-off in the northern part of the system, near El Portal, near the Little River area, and a task force was created. I served on the task force, and we came up with a number of recommendations, one of which was to create this position to really advise our mayor and our commissioners, and also to serve as a coordinator. We have so many jurisdictions. In Miami-Dade County, we have 34 cities. A lot of them are coastal. We also have state government, which manages a lot of those canals and keeps us dry. It's quite an old, system, and it's really an amazing engineering marvel, if you ask me. It literally did dry up the swamp. And also, I deal with a lot of the federal entities as well, Army Corps of Engineers, and the national park systems. We have 2 national parks here in Miami-Dade County we're very proud of. And so there's a lot of coordination. And even in internal government, you have a lot of coordination. You heard our water and sewer director who's working really hard to get people off septic systems, something that we should have never planned and done to begin with. But nevertheless, these are the lessons that we've learned along the way. And
Great.
I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Irela. And Christian?
Yep, hi everybody, Christian Kamrath. So I'm in our Office of Resilience and I work on our adaptation team. We have a couple teams and now several new chiefs, which is great. Irela and another Chief Heat Officer, Jane Gilbert, to focus on that work. But on the adaptation team, we've traditionally and are still pretty focused on flooding and sea level rise and the multiple flood hazards that are amplified by sea level rise, as I was describing in the film. But it's really a combination of education, both internally across our departments, so many departments, and then obviously externally, so working with universities, community-based organizations, and others to educate about how is, what is our history of living with water? How have we changed the landscape? Where are we now? What are some of the approaches we can take to adapt? And then obviously working with commissioners and our other departments about reforming policy, strengthening policy, and really thinking through, are there certain processes, planning that we need to be, totally reframing or thinking through in different lenses to achieve these goals that our great and ambitious mayor has set out for us.
Thank you. As the first ever Chief Bay Officer, that's an incredibly daunting prospect. What is the most pressing thing that you're trying to tackle during your time in office?
To really lower the nutrient pollution in the Bay. It's really affecting everything. And
as was mentioned, sorry to interrupt, Biscayne Bay is the source of drinking water for Miami-Dade County.
So we are lucky enough to have an aquifer system. So the aquifer system recharges with rainfall. And so really all we have to do is stick a straw, treat it, and drink it. It's that simple. And so we've been very fortunate that we have that natural source of drinking water. But it's constantly compromised from saltwater intrusion because of sea level rise. And so we're constantly, really trying to make sure that we protect that source of drinking water. And also Biscayne Bay, which is also another source of economic, development from, we're the cruise capital of the world, even though right now things are not great for that. But, we have recreation, our beaches. And so every time we have a beach closure, for example, because of a sewer main break, because our aging infrastructure is so old, that impacts our economy. And it's, and it impacts obviously our environment. So really lowering the nutrient levels, really slowly recovering the bay
back to health and really, just starting in areas where the pollution levels are really high, like the Little River, and kind of like triage, stop the bleeding and then treat the disease. It's a large watershed.
Yes. And Christian, some of your work, as stated in the documentary short, revolves around planning. You mentioned the sea level rise project. Can you tell me more about Thrive 305?
Yeah, Thrive 305, the mayor was describing basically this unprecedented public engagement effort ahead of this upcoming budget cycle that we're currently in the middle of. And it was really amazing. I mean, they really enlisted a lot of the departments, or obviously our staff, to get educated on other parts of the county and how that works, because it's sort of a new policy of a no wrong door sort of thing. So if someone's coming to a county employee, no matter where they work, whether it's in transit or what have you, they have a way of connecting people to the services they're seeking. But that Thrive 305 campaign, it was really important, obviously, to talk about the civic process and kind of renew that sense of pride and being active in your community, but also listening and hearing the priorities and the concerns that folks have. And so I think that's where the mayor's budget is now aligned with those Thrive 305 strategies. And a lot of people, not surprisingly, are worried about impacts of climate change and the impacts of water quality on their health and the health of the environment.
As briefly mentioned, the Everglades are also a key part of having fresh water in South Florida. What are some of the challenges you're facing as it relates to development and possibly overdevelopment as Miami-Dade continues to grow?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
That was a deep sigh.
We can tag team on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we think a lot about land use and sustainable land use patterns, and we've come a certain distance doing things a certain way. And this is a big part of our sea level rise strategy. Obviously, when we think about 2 feet of sea level rise in the next 40 years or so.
2 feet.
Yeah.
24 inches of sea level rise.
Right.
That's very real because a lot of Miami is literally on the water.
Yeah.
So what are some of those plans to mitigate that?
Yeah, so basically, that's outlined in the strategy, right? But it includes an intersection with land use. So we talk about building on high ground around transit as one of the 5 main approaches. We also talk about building greenways and blueways. So in our low-lying areas.
And what's a greenway and blueway, please?
Yeah, a greenway, if you guys don't know, it's basically a linear stretch of park, whether it's along a waterway or on land, that provides protected, mobility and access, connecting folks who want to walk, bike, use other non-motorized vehicles to get around. That and blueways, along and in our waterways as ways to connect people, and just understanding that there might, be locations where it's just very hard to justify continued investment when it's literally, less than 1 or 2 feet above sea level. So how can we assist and help residents who are suffering today, let alone with 2 feet of sea level rise, to, adapt, whether in place or otherwise. So, I think we've outlined a really set of key approaches, but where it really happens, right, is on the local level, and we've been doing that through an adaptation action area planning process. That's some of the work that we've been doing in Little River and will be ongoing, and it's a program I know other communities across the state are looking, and municipalities within the county are also using in different ways to facilitate this process of, how are we going to best align and synthesize all of the priorities that we have about affordable housing, connecting to sewer. Land is valuable in these highly urbanized areas, and so how can we do the most public good with using our public land to, expand sewer system, site pump stations, and so forth. So. We're really diving into it now, having those tough conversations both internally and more externally with communities.
And for you, Irela?
Well, every time we lose more land, especially down south near sensitive areas, it creates a problem because
it creates an unbalanced, growth. And this is what we've seen over time. And these are, we're experiencing now and we heard the vice chair say that, we're experiencing now the bad decisions made in the past. And so I hope that because of that, our policymakers realize that we have to move forward in a balanced approach, and we do have to use nature as another tool in the toolbox. So natural infrastructure really can create levels of protection, and we had them before. We had all of our seawalls were mangroves back then, and we're starting to realize that mangroves not only serve a storm surge protection, but they are also carbon sinks, and we're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with all of that, and they're also filtration systems and natural nurseries for our habitat along the bay. So really, as we move forward with these sea level rise strategies and the climate action plans, really educating our residents on nature. Nature can be also another tool we can use. You don't necessarily have to raise your seawall another 10 feet. Maybe raise your home and plant mangroves instead, and you still won't lose your view. That's kind of an approach that we'd like to start seeing.
As part of that, as mentioned, I'm a teacher. I was a teacher for a very, very long time, and I believe that this form of medium is a form of education, but simultaneously you have to educate the populace. So what are some of the initiatives or programs, because public education takes a very, very long time for it to become habit and it to become second nature. So what are some of the ideas you're thinking to educate the populace around what they can do, because everyone plays a part?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, upcoming, you heard about the king tides. It's not news to a lot of you here in Florida. But one thing that we do is obviously partner with our academic and higher education institutions. So Florida International University has a Sea Level Solutions Day that happens every fall when we get our highest high tides. And it's a huge citizen science effort, right? You get dozens and dozens of volunteers, and now they've been doing it for several years now, going back to the same places. I'll never forget the first time I went out with those citizens and leading, all right, let's measure the depth of the water in this street that, I don't see water anywhere as far as a water body, but several blocks in, I'm seeing a foot of seawater. We're gonna measure the depth, the salinity, and do a fecal coliform test to see, if it's contaminated. So we're generating this database, and obviously data plays a huge role in making it digestible for folks to understand. Obviously a hands-on activity, being out in the field and seeing the impact firsthand, and then kind of understanding the science and how the government and policymakers are thinking about working on this issue. So citizen science efforts like that, and then just helping people connect the dots. So we just did an outreach event in the Little River community that is flood prone. And obviously we wanted to talk about sea level rise and the challenges that we're facing today and in the future. But primarily we did a hurricane preparedness event, right? So most folks in Florida, we understand hurricane season. We're seeing it affect other places on a yearly basis. And so obviously it's about getting the hook, right? Of like, okay, we are familiar with hurricanes. Some folks who moved to Florida may not be as familiar, so there's a chance to educate on that. But then, we know and understand that water is a friend, but it can also be a threat. And so how can we be most prepared, individually, maybe within your household, as a neighborhood, and what are those services that the county or municipalities offer, in those times of need to help folks who need a little bit more assistance for emergency evacuation, for instance. But that's a good lead into having this conversation about what have you been seeing in terms of changing patterns and rainfall and flooding over time, and what can we be doing in the next few years in this neighborhood so that we're not having to go through this suffering over and over again and the damage.
And Irela, part of your work as Chief Bay Officer is to decrease the nutrient load. Part of it, as we were just talking, is education to inform the citizens of Miami-Dade what they can do. So what can everyday people do to help reduce the nutrient load in Biscayne Bay?
Well,
it starts, I mean, a lot of people, the average individual can do a lot of things. The big challenge is that we live in such a large county with such a diverse community. So people come from all over with different habits and different perspectives on the environment. And so making it as simple as possible for folks to understand that everything we do on the land ends up in the bay in some form. We have canal systems, we have stormwater systems. Whether you're in West Kendall, it's gonna end up in the bay somehow. And so that's the message that we're trying to convey. And it's real simple things that people can do. We just passed one of the strongest fertilizer ordinance in the state. That's one way. So during the summertime, we should not be fertilizing our lawns because we get a lot of rain. So it makes no sense. It's all gonna wash into the storm drains anyway. So that's a form of education, and that's one way the average property owner can help. One, pick up your trash.
Just that simple.
Just pick up your trash. It's gonna end up in the storm drains, it's gonna end up in the bay, the plastic pollution. I mean, really lower your consumption. And you know, pet waste carries a lot of nitrogen pollution, believe it or not. And so we are always saying, just, you know, pick up after your pets. Just pick up after yourselves, really, is the message.
Great. As we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts, Christian?
Yeah, I think as a planner and in the planning world, and especially with climate change planning and adaptation, we've had a really good sort of history of doing the planning, and I think, you know, working in the field, and of course residents feel this urge of like, when are we going to implement? When are we going to see change? And it can be very frustrating, right? Because it takes a lot of good planning to have good cross-sectoral, cohesive implementation. But we have faith and are hopeful, especially on the adaptation side. The state of Florida, many folks are probably familiar, the Resilient Florida grant program. We've been spending the last several weeks working across our departments, and we've got a really good planning framework through our Resilient 305 strategy, our sea level rise strategy, and now to an even lower level, the Little River Adaptation Action Area, to really show an alignment of the priorities and the policies, and to have identified these projects for septic to sewer conversion, for elevating roads, for flood-proofing critical facilities. So we put ourselves in, I think, a really good position, and I think the deadline's today at 5 p.m. for submitting those.
Things to do.
And luckily, we've got most of them in yesterday, but you know, hundreds of millions of dollars up for grabs coming from the state, partly, you know, American Rescue Act funds, but the state is doing a better job on the adaptation side of putting in the funding mechanisms to help us do the implementation and additional planning as well.
Irela?
Yeah, and that's the good news. I mean, you know, with every challenge comes opportunity, right? And so we're starting to see that across the board. And fortunately, we have the support at all levels of government, really focusing on ensuring that, you know, we can have a resilient community, a resilient bay, that the resources are there. And frankly, all this infrastructure, you can't have a plan without vision. And so all these all these infrastructure improvements that we're going to have to make will also create jobs and economic development. And I got to tell you, not a couple of weeks go by where I'm not meeting with some young entrepreneur startup with some amazing, you know, thing that they can do to help Biscayne Bay recover, whether it's an autonomous, you know, gadget that can clean up the canals, or, you know, a vending machine that takes in recycled materials and gives you an incentive. So these are things that are just cropping up that gives me hope and makes me, you know, excited about the future.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Christian Kamrath, as well as Irela Bagay. And also, I think Rogelio Madang is in here. If he is, just wave or stand. Hi, Rogelio. Hi, thanks again for your help. Is anyone else here from the Dock Short? I'd also like to thank Lisa Colmenares. Is she here? Hi, Lisa. Thanks for reaching out to me last year to commission me to do this. Storytelling is such a key part of communicating information, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'd also like to thank Wyatt as well as the entire APA team. Thanks so much for your time. Enjoy your conference.